Namaskara, good evening, and welcome to today's BIC Streams session, Kasa Connections, Solid Waste Management, Worker Safety, and Public Health. This session is part of the ongoing Bengaluru Solutions series with our collaborators, Vidhi Center for Legal Policy and Citizen Matters. Solid waste management is a Gordian knot of urban issues deeply embedded in the larger context of consumerism, informal livelihoods, urban ecology, and the political economy of urban development. The question of managing urban waste involves legal, political, economic, and social challenges spanning urban infrastructure, technical and human capacities, workers' safety and welfare, cooperation with local government and citizens, planning, public health, climate change preparedness, and sustainable development. Vidhi's documentary, Garbage Matters, highlights the mounting problem of disposal of municipal waste in Delhi, the implementation of Solid Waste Management Rules 2016, and various judicial interventions on the issue. While the film focuses on Delhi, the issues discussed have significant resonances with other Indian cities, particularly Bengaluru. This evening, we begin with a screening of Garbage Matters, a 20-minute documentary made by the team at Vidhi Center for Legal Policy. Post the screening, Devaditya Sinha, Senior Resident Fellow at Vidhi Center for Legal Policy, will provide comment about the film and the making of it while foregrounding the panel discussion. Following this, Satarupa Sen Bhattacharya, National Editor of Citizen Matters, will moderate a panel of experts and stakeholders with Sarfaraz Khan, Joint Commissioner, Solid Waste Management, Bengaluru, Pinky Chandran, Independent Researcher, Author, and Journalist, Dr. Rajashri Reddy, Associate Professor, University of Toronto, Rajendra Prabhakar, Social Activist and Trustee at Marga, and Mansoor Gauze, operator of the Jayanagar Dry Waste Collection Center in Bengaluru. And now, the documentary Garbage Matters.
Almitra Patel, a civic activist and the first woman engineer to have graduated from the prestigious Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Cambridge, was appalled that Indian cities did not know what to do with their waste. In the 1990s, most of this waste was simply dumped in the open. She brought this to the attention of the Supreme Court of India, demanding a stop to the open dumping of waste. The Apex Court set up a committee to suggest solutions to the problem of solid waste management, which eventually led to the passage of the Solid Waste Management Rules 2000. Indian cities have still not learned to manage their waste. A new set of solid waste management rules have also been enacted in 2016. Many petitions, many committees, and many rules later, what has changed? Have we paid attention to the lives of those who manage our waste? We look at these questions by following the journey of waste in Delhi.
मेरी उम्र 23 साल है और मैं सुबह 6 बजे कबाड़ा बीनने जाता हूँ।
कबाड़े के काम में तो खतरा ही खतरा है।
हाँ, दिक्कत तो आती है। लोग बाग कहते हैं चोर ही करता है, चोर है।
और दूसरी बात, एक वहाँ पुलिस वाला था, वो कहता था तुम लोग बांग्लादेशी हो, इधर साले आओगे पकड़ के बंद कर दूंगा। बहुत कुछ परेशानी हुआ, ऐसे तो परेशानी का कोई अनगिनत कहानी है। रहते हैं, उसमें ब्लेड कंच वगैरह रहते हैं, बच्चों के हाथ कट जाते हैं, बहुत सारा प्रॉब्लम है, गंदगी बहुत रहते हैं उसमें।
जैसे धूल मिट्टी सब चिपके रहते थे, अच्छा नहीं लगता था। तब हो गया है, मतलब आदत सी हो गई है। कानून लगाया भी तो अच्छे के लिए ही लगाया था, पर हुआ नहीं, ऐसा कुछ हुआ नहीं।
Delhi, the capital of India, has failed in managing its solid waste. According to the Master Plan of the City 2021, 3 of Delhi's landfill sites exhausted their capacity in 2008.
If you look at waste management in India overall, there's about 62 million tons per annum of garbage that is produced on an annual basis, which is roughly 1,41,000 tons per day. Coming down to Delhi, amongst the metropolitans, it is the highest generator, somewhere around 11,000 to 11,500 tons per day of garbage that is collected or produced every day. Less than 5% of decentralized processing in Delhi, almost 80% of centralized incineration-based processing, which is via waste-to-energy plants, and then remaining of it is dumped. So I feel, in terms of painting a picture on processing and disposal, I think this is the worst model that exists in the country, and contradictory to the fact that this is the capital.
Delhi has 2 distinct waste disposal mechanisms. The source of waste is mostly households and hotels. The first mechanism is the informal waste picker, and the other one, a private concessionaire employed by the MCD.
If you look at waste management in Delhi, you can basically divide it into 2 parts. One is the formal management system, which is majorly governed by the municipality, and the informal system, wherein the RWAs rope in informal sector, and then the work goes by. In the formal chain, typically it works as a contract agreement between the municipality and a private concessionaire. Basically, they hire a third-party agency that is responsible for collection, taking waste to a designated point from where it goes for processing and disposal. In an informal chain, basically all the resident welfare associations of Delhi, they rope in informal sector for collecting waste, and then they would, in their push carts, go to a designated point, which is Dhalao in case of Delhi, and from there it's picked up by a municipal compactor, and then in certain areas of Delhi it goes to a fixed compactor transfer station, and from there to a waste to energy plant. In certain areas of Delhi, directly from there goes to a dumping point. So these are the 2 collection mechanisms that are adopted in Delhi predominantly.
Appalled by how Indian urban centres manage their municipal solid waste, Almitra Patel, a civic activist, filed a petition in the Supreme Court in 1996. This led to the enactment of the Municipal Solid Waste Management Rules 2000. Many petitions have been filed since, and many orders passed.
There have been some major cases in the Supreme Court. B.L. Vadhera comes to my mind, was the first case of trying to look at solid waste management. Then Almitra Patel's case came out, and so in municipal solid waste I'm talking. But now there have been so many judgments of the National Green Tribunal, the high courts, the lower courts. It's everywhere. But basically after 2016, we've had this modified municipal solid waste rules. So the court's the rule is pretty solid, I think. The rule has all areas, all grounds covered, because long experience of understanding what the problems were in the 2000 rules.
The NGT, through orders in Almitra Patel versus Union of India, is monitoring the implementation of Solid Waste Management Rules 2016. Despite several judgments being passed by the apex court of the country and the National Green Tribunal, there are problems in their implementation. The most important one is integration. SWM Rules 2016 and SWM bylaws encouraged integration of the informal sector into the waste value chain. But the solid waste management system in Delhi barely offers any recommendations for informal waste pickers.
Delhi also has a huge population of informal workers. If you break it down into numbers, it's about 1.3 to 1.4 million. And if we talk about the country figure as a whole, 2% of the urban population of the country is informal sector, which are directly or indirectly related with waste management related jobs. Imagine a life in a city without a kabadi wala, without a rack picker. You know, the moment you throw something that has value, it just gets vanished from the road, and there's no magician out there. There's actually a rack picker, you know, who picks it up and sends it to the informal recycling stream. So I feel it's high time that cities, especially cities like Delhi, give due credit to the informal system. Also, municipalities here should play a crucial role in ensuring that informal sector is somehow integrated.
जो कूड़ा चुकते हैं, बीनते हैं कबाड़ी लोग, वो तो बेचारे यही है कि अपने 150 का बिल लेते हैं, तो वही अपने बेच बाच कर रोटी खा लेते हैं, चाय पानी पी लेते हैं, अपने खर्चे के लिए बीन के कबाड़ा।
Rack pickers are doing a great service. They are rendering a huge service to society. That needs to be acknowledged. They should be paid for it. Otherwise, they are living on the edge and just trying to sell whatever they pick and make a little bit of money out of it. But if they are made safe, because they are constantly exposed to batteries and toxic things and rusted metal and broken glass, so they need to be looked after, they need to be made safe, they need to understand their own safety, they need to earn some money from it because it's a service.
नहीं, हमारे पास तो नहीं है आई कार्ड। अगर बन जाए तो अच्छी बात है, तो फिर जैसे हम लोग कबाड़ी का काम कर रहे हैं, कहीं पे चोरी वोरी हो रहा है, तो हम दिखा सकते हैं कि हम कबाड़ी का काम कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि हम चोरी नहीं करते। जैसा भी करते हैं, इज्जत का काम करते हैं और इज्जत का खाते हैं।
The importance of acknowledging them is basically, or acknowledging the sector, is then you can actually create more robust partnerships with them. So the informal sector is responsible for a lot of the collection. Even when formal sector actors get contracts, they normally informally subcontract the informal sector. In Delhi, in East Delhi, most of the doorstep collection is still done by informal sector. The East Delhi Municipal Corporation has not very much to do with it. And they also do the segregation, they also do the hyper-segregation.
NGT directed that tipping fees should be based on the quality of waste. But the tipping fee is usually charged by the plant operators based on the quantity of the mixed waste received at the plant.
Municipalities really need to up their game. Also the kind of collaborations that they do with private bodies. There's a concept called tipping fee, wherein you sign an agreement with a private concessionaire, and most of the times these agreements are based on collection and transportation and disposal of garbage. I feel that that needs to change. In the West, tipping fee means that if you dump, you pay, if you incinerate, you pay, which means that if you use any resources of municipality, you need to pay a fee. But I think in India, we've really adopted it in a long manner. Here, if we dump, we get money. If we incinerate, we get money, which is the tipping fee. So I think tipping fee, the entire concept needs to be worked down. It has to be on collection and processing and not collection and disposal.
जो अभी यहाँ गाड़ी लगा है, ये तो लोकल इसको नहीं मिल रहा ना, ये तो कंपनी वालों को मिल रहा है। ये कंपनी वाले की तरफ से गाड़ी है, जो हम कूड़ा उठा रहे हैं, हमें कुछ नहीं मिल रहा, जैसे हमें देना चाहिए था ये काम।
According to the new rules of SWM 2016, segregation is the responsibility of the waste generator. In fact, according to the new rules, segregation needs to be ensured at all steps of the waste chain. but there is no implementation happening at the grassroots level.
गीला कचरा और सूखा कचरा दोनों टाइप के कचरे उसको हमें सेग्रीगेट करना चाहिए, पर घर पे मैक्सिमम लोग नहीं करते हैं ये चीज़, बट ये एक्सरसाइज करनी चाहिए।
अब क्या पता इसका नहीं कोई वजह है ना कोई मतलब है क्या, क्यों का ये अभी कर रहे हैं, कोई 1 महीने से ये 2 महीने से कर रहे हैं, यानी सब पूरा एक ही साथ बाल्टी में जाता था जीएसटी में।
अवेयरनेस, कईयों का अवेयरनेस भी नहीं है, थोड़ा आलसपन भी है, तो नहीं सब लेते हैं एक ही डस्टबिन में थ्रो कर देते हैं। घर पे ये होता है कि कूड़े वाला आता उठा के चलो ले गया, बट वो सेपरेट तो होता नहीं ना, वो एक ही जगह सब कुछ जा रहा है।
People don't segregate their waste adequately, particularly things like syringes, which diabetics use, diapers, menstrual waste, sharps, broken glass. All of that is mixed up and thrown away in the waste, routinely. And then they get injuries, and when they get injuries, they're not able to work as efficiently. And if those injuries are quite serious, for example, if there's acid that you've thrown away after cleaning, and somebody opens that bottle and they're just taken a bunch of acid fumes, they might not even be able to work and they might need medical help, in which case not only do they lose earnings, but they also lose money for the day. And so vulnerability not only comes from external factors beyond the control of waste generators, vulnerability is also generated by poor behavior exhibited by waste generators.
Cardboard has to go in cardboard, paper has to go in the paper. उसको जो अलग अलग सब चीज़ें कबाड़ी वाले अच्छे आते थे तो वो सेग्रीगेट भी करते थे और उनका रीयूज़ भी होता था, लिफाफे बनते थे, बहुत कुछ होता था, लेकिन अब वो सब नहीं होता। आई थिंक पहले लोग जो करते थे वो ज़्यादा बेटर काम था। अब क्योंकि हम इतने मॉडर्नाइज हो गए हैं कि हम भी कहते हैं दिस इज़ अ वेस्ट, वी डोंट हैव टाइम टू डू ऑल दिस।
मुझे आता नहीं था किस में क्या डालें, और गीला सूखा और जो गंदा कपड़ा या फिर हागिस वगिस, यही सब, कांच का टुकड़ा, कभी हाथ कट जाता था, पैर कट जाते थे, प्रॉब्लम होती थी।
Suppose I am the consumer, I am the citizen, I am segregating my waste, but when the waste gets collected, it gets collected again in the same bin, in the same trolley. If you want my segregated waste, you must show that 2 waste streams are going to different places. So that it's a systemic requirement. So for citizens' action to succeed, you need the systems also in place. Otherwise, you lose motivation.
If the garbage guy comes, they should be that much educated that आपने कौन सा कूड़ा गीले में रखना है या वो उसके पास 2 boxes हो. They just come with a big bag and everybody is giving the black bags to them or whatever bags they have, or they empty their buckets in there. They don't separate it. They need to make strict, or they can fine the people if it's not separated.
काम तो अभी कुछ बदला ही नहीं है जी। काम जो कूड़ा सोसाइटी को जो कूड़ा उठाते हैं उसमें काम बदला नहीं है। ये सरकार इसमें लागू किया था कि ये गीला कूड़ा अलग, सूखा कूड़ा अलग, रिजेक्ट कूड़ा अलग देने के प्रॉब्लम बनाया था, और कुछ दिनों के लिए अब दिया भी, कोई दिया भी नहीं। अब बताओ एकदम ही बंद है, और अभी चाह रहा है किसी सोसाइटी में कैसा करे, सूखा अलग दे, गीला अलग दे, रिजेक्ट अलग दे, और इसमें उनको भी तकलीफ ज़्यादा होता है। अगर कोई सरकार एक बार ड्रम भी दिया था कि अलग अलग कूड़ा देना है, पर ये सब कुछ करते नहीं है, उसी बाल्टी को अपना काम में लगा लेते हैं, इस्तेमाल कर लेते हैं, बस वही हालत है अभी, वही सब एक साथ मिक्स ही दे रहा।
Do you think MCD actually communicates with the citizens? I don't think so. If they had a decent awareness campaign telling people what happens to the waste and how waste needs to be managed and how the landfills are growing and how it becomes toxic, but most citizens don't know. And a lot of them don't care because they don't know.
To tackle the issue of waste management, the mindset of the courts, implementing bodies and people needs to change. There has to be a shift in values causing triggered responses. No rules or judgments can be implemented without a systemic change.
Waste is something which can be managed. It's not something which needs to be just thrown out and left to the municipality. The courts also are following this top-down approach. They're ordering the municipalities. Now, ordering the municipalities, how long can you, pardon the expression, but flog a dead horse? It's doing what it can. It's the nature of the beast. So you need to, if the court needs to play a role, they need to find ways in which the municipalities can work differently. Maybe order a committee which will think how the municipalities can do the same thing differently, or how they can ensure maybe a different way in which you measure success.
When it comes to court orders, I also feel that it shouldn't be all about hearings. It should be about real action on the ground, and I feel sometimes that is lagging. It shouldn't be all about paperwork where municipalities and pollution control boards are only working to submit documents to the court. I feel the court should also look into implementation in terms of what real change after an order has been prosecuted, what has happened on the ground.
सुप्रीम कोर्ट कर चुका है, पर दिल्ली नगर निगम को भी तो करना चाहिए। दिल्ली नगर निगम को भी तो देखना चाहिए कि गरीब आदमी कैसे गुजारा करेगा। इसका जो माल मेहनत का खाली सिर्फ उसको माल मिला, इसको तनख्वाह नहीं मिल रहा, तो कॉर्पोरेशन को भी कुछ करना चाहिए इसके लिए।
We have to invest money into improved recycling, because at this point in the recycling hubs that we have in Delhi, according to government, they can be polluting, and if they are polluting, it's our job to use technology and help them not to be polluting, rather than merely close them down, because that's not a solution. They'll go somewhere else and pollute somewhere else.
So we all have to train each other, including our helpers and the garbage collector, as to what is wet waste and what is dry waste, and then keep it separately and give it separately, and then hopefully it stays separate as it goes to the Dhalao and when it reaches the landfill.
You have to start from your own house. Nobody else is going to come and do it for you.
It is hard to say if courts can really play that role. You know, the courts may not be in the best position to do such long-term intensive monitoring. After all, there are judicial bodies. They are very good and when they have to pass judgment on something, but to monitor action on the ground is a hard thing for the court to do. So often many of these committees which are formed, or these groups which with the court orders, they end up giving a report to the court, and the court then gives some directions based on that, and the case gets closed, but nothing changes on the ground.
Or the capacities of PCBs or municipalities in a way should be upgraded, so that there's a dedicated person to look into various cases or various orders that happen on waste management or other allied issues.
वो जज जो सबसे सुप्रीम कोर्ट सबसे बड़ा है, उनका नहीं सुन रहे हैं, तो हमारे सुनेंगे? बिल्कुल भी नहीं सुनेंगे.
If you don't identify the bottlenecks, then the judgments don't make very much sense to my mind. But if you identify bottlenecks, then you can break those bottlenecks using judicial power. So the courts are doing the best, but the system has to now also meet the expectations.
I would now like to invite Debaditya Sinha to provide comment on the film that we just watched, Garbage Matters.
Thank you, Lekha. I thank Citizen Matters and Bangalore International Center for organizing the screening of this documentary, and the eminent guests and viewers who are present today. Garbage Matters is one of the 5 documentary movies we have produced on implementation of key environmental judgments. The other 4 movies relates to issues such as firecrackers ban in Delhi, NCR, protection of wildlife corridors around Kaziranga National Park, restoration of water resources in industrial area of Bolaram Pathancheru, Telangana, and compensation for environment damage from a dam company in Uttarakhand. Now, why did we make these documentaries? So for that, let me give you a little introduction about Vidhi Center for Legal Policy. We are an independent policy research think tank with a focus on making better laws and improving governance. We work on various topics such as judicial reforms, constitution, gender, sexuality, finance, education, health, and so on. And environment is one of the subjects Vidhi has been working for over the last 5-6 years. And the environment team at Vidhi has been doing research on the legal and policy aspects of environmental law to see their effectiveness on ground. So this, for instance, includes studies on effectiveness of Environment Relief Fund, which was established to support victims of industrial disasters, quick disbursal of compensation awarded by National Tribunal, One of the studies we focused on the implementation of EI notification 2006 in the background of the promise of quick approvals by the government of India and how they compromise the decision-making process. And all our studies have been in public interest, independently designed with the ultimate aim to not only raise public awareness, but to also educate the lawmakers and various actors in the delivery of justice. So whether lawyers, judges, civil society, or even an academician. And in all these studies, we found like there is an immense role which Supreme Court has played in shaping the environment jurisprudence of the country. And it won't be wrong to say that we are really fortunate to have such active judiciary in place to safeguard the environment and keeping an open door to every victims of environmental abuse through public interest litigations, setting up special green bench, establishing centrally like the Central Inquiry Committee for Forest Matters, or even this National Green Tribunal, which was established after the intervention of the Supreme Court. Now, the academic literature and the narrative of environmental justice is majorly limited to the critique of judgments and its merits. When we speak to activists and lawyers, be it young or very senior, most of them, though, had immense faith in the judiciary, but they also said that ground reality remains the same. And the reason is, while we have been very innovative and active in making new laws and courts passing some landmark judgments, the situation only worsened on ground. It hasn't improved. If you take this India's ranking in the environmental index, global environment index, it is around 168 out of 180. So it's terrible. So I mean, India has such great laws, so much active judiciary. Like we have special environment court like NGT. I think India is one of the few countries in the world to have a dedicated code on environment. Even we have great lawyers like MC Mehta, who dedicated his entire life to this cause of environmental justice. But yet, our Indian environment is in such a bad state. We tried to find some literature on implementation of environment judgments given by Supreme Court, especially, and we couldn't find much published information on that. And we realized that like there is a limited research as well as limited attention being paid to the implementation of these judgments, which are very important. And this was an unexplored and perhaps the most critical area for environment justice. So courts have done their work, but what after that? That was the question we tried to answer. And we launched this project called Courting the Environment. It was a long, ambitious project where we created a database of all the environment judgments from the Supreme Court starting from 1980 to 2018 and analyzed them to understand the reason of success or failure. Not all judgments are failure. There are also success stories as well. And in this series, we have shown one success story as well. So, and the second part, we tried to do an in-depth analysis of 5 landmark judgments. And the entire ground level survey we did in between 2019 to 2020. And this movie, Garbage Matters, was the last of them all. And I will come to it, like why it was challenging to make this movie. So, but this subject-based management itself is such a complicated subject because there are so many actors involved, so many different social and economic factors to be considered. And over that, there are so many judicial information in this matter, right from B.L. Vadhera versus of India and Almitra Patel in 1990s, like from 1984, 95. And then this case is transferred to a National Green Tribunal, which is now closely monitoring its implementation. There have been a series of expert committees constituted in this matter. There have been like contradicting affidavits and findings, submitted to the court. So it was not an easy job for the court as well as for the researcher to, show everything in a 15 to 20 minutes of a documentary. So we had to like select a particular issue. So in 2016, major development was this new solid waste management rules, which was introduced by the government and replaced this MSW rules of 2000. So these new rules were able to incorporate new concepts that were overlooked in previous rules. So we thought this is the thing we can see in detail, one aspect of it. And most important part was this NGT issued extensive directions with respect to implementation of these rules in 2016 itself, right after this notification. So now when we started researching, we found that there are the waste value chain in Delhi follows 2 parallel cycles. One is the formal chain involving private concessionaires and municipalities, and the second is this informal chain involving unorganized sector, which has been traditionally doing all this waste collection and recycling. Now, local government in Delhi has preferred working with the private concessionaires, like giving contract to some private companies to manage waste, go to residential areas for collection, all this thing. Now, the informal sector has, in this process, informal sector has been denied access to those areas because these people, they because there's some contract with the municipality, they're private companies, so they don't like informal sector to come in their areas, so they didn't access to those areas. Whereas this integration of this informal sector to this waste value chain is very critical. So on the one hand, you complain that inadequate infrastructure is the major hurdle to implementing these rules. On the other hand, you have completely ignored the huge informal sector that largely contributes to this waste value chain. So that was the focus of this documentary. The law is there, how to do it, but the system in place, and whether we have been considered enough on the ground realities while implementing these rules. Even a think tank like us or an officer in municipal corporation will hardly understand until we really want to understand the realities. So lastly, coming to challenges in shooting this movie, I must tell you that we did most of the shooting around Halaswa landfill in Delhi, near North Delhi, and we spent a significant time interacting with the waste workers, understanding the waste value chain and the political economy of the waste collection is very important to understand. And there were so many other things which prevented waste workers from speaking, because there are fear of harassment from police. In the movie they have talked about it. There are harassment by corporations, the local politicians. So there are many other factors which we couldn't show in the movie, but there are many factors which affect this whole process. And by the time we decided to shoot the documentary, there was also social interest in Delhi over the Citizen Amendment Bill, which was soon followed with the COVID pandemic. So many times we had to change our plans and schedules, due to the things which were beyond our control. But I must thank my colleague Yogini Oak and Isha Rana, who did not, give up the situation and ensured we completed our film despite all the odds. And I must thank the team of Riverbank Studios, who stitched together all our research and completed shooting and editing of this film in one of the toughest times. And special thanks to Dia Mirza and our funders, Tata Development Trust and Voltas. And I hope you all like this documentary and do watch the other 4 movies in the series. They are available on Vidhi's website and YouTube channel under the title Coating the Environment. So I repeat, Coating the Environment. So if you search on Vidhi's website or YouTube, you can easily get it. There are 5 documentaries, very short, 15-20 minutes each on different subjects. With this, I stop here. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity to share my views. Yeah.
Thank you, Debaditya. We now hand it over to Shatrupa Sen Bhattacharya to take the panel forward.
Thank you, Lekha. Thank you to BIC and to Vidhi for arranging this session. And I cannot but start the panel without a big shout out to Debaditya and the entire team that has shot this documentary, which we just saw. It is very telling, and I'm so, in a way, it makes me, very happy and sad at the same time. I'm very happy that a film like this has been made, because I know while some of these issues may appear very obvious and evident to us who are continuously engaging in the sphere of waste, very little of this actually goes out to the people who also need to know about what are the issues. Waste is a very emotive issue. I keep saying this, in every city, you speak to any citizen and you ask them their problems and you raise the issue of waste, you can get into an hour-long conversation. So waste is a very emotive issue across sections of the people, but most of us beyond a certain circle do not always know the real challenges that make waste management such an arduous task. So thank you to the Vidhi team for putting this together, and I hope it reaches a large number of people. But as I was saying, it also makes me sad, because in a way I'm actually seeing something before my eyes. It's like a retelling of the fact that despite, as even Dia Mirza says at the beginning of the film, so many judgments and so many petitions, so many orders, so many laws passed, rules formulated, and yet we don't seem to have made much progress on the ground. Most importantly, I think we have let down our informal waste picker sector in a big way, in some ways through non-implementation of the laws that have been passed. And while the film focused only on Delhi, I know for a fact that many of these issues find resonance across cities. We are going to talk about Bangalore today mostly in this discussion. Of course, Namma Bengaluru, to its credit, has had many firsts spearheaded by the effort of citizens, NGOs, of course, judiciary as well, and the municipal body, with the support of the municipal body. But uh, and so, not but so it is also in some sense at a slightly more evolved stage as compared to many of the other metropolitan cities. So when we talk about integration of waste pickers, Bangalore was probably one of the first, if not the first ULB to issue occupational identity cards for waste pickers. As of the figures that I have with me, which for 2018, around 7,000 waste pickers were registered. We saw about the failure to segregate waste at source in the film. Bengaluru was also one of the first cities that actually experimented with the three-way segregation, and not just three-way segregation. We've seen the evolution of dry waste collection centers or DWCCs starting at a very early stage, much before the solid waste management rules of 2000 to 2016. And in fact, post a High Court direction in 2012, we've had DWCCs across wards. One significant diversion from what I saw in the film about Delhi, one significant progress, I would say, is that it is waste pickers have become, the center of many policy discourses. They are very much at the focus of policy discussions and discussions on how their welfare can be promoted. And of course, most recently, we have had the notification of the SWM bylaws 2020, which again take all these things further forward. But despite all this, yes, the actual results on the ground are not what we would have liked to see. We are very, very far from 100% segregation. The registration of informal workers, though it was a good start, I think has been rather low in terms of numbers. Most importantly, the realities of these workers, even those on the rolls of the municipality, raise important questions about the true impact of such integration. What do we mean by integration? What kind of integration is an enabler at all? So if I look at the entire domain of solid waste management, it is actually very aptly described as a Gordian knot of issues because it spans legal, political, economic, social, host of other challenges. And of course, if all of this was not enough, then we had the pandemic, we had COVID, which seems to have made the knot so much tighter that it's almost seemingly impossible to unravel it. So we are we're going to try and see how we can, come up with solutions to some of these issues. And I have a panel of very eminent practitioners with me today who've all been associated in this larger sphere of waste management and worker safety in a big way for decades, for years, if not decades. And I would start the conversation with Mr. Sarfaraz Khan, who's the Joint Commissioner of Solid Waste Management at the VBMP. Good evening, sir. Thank you very much for being here today. And I would just request you to start with your observations on how the solid waste management bylaws, the bylaws that were drafted just before the pandemic struck us, how the implementation of these has fared over the past 1 year. And we had some very positive looking provisions there in terms of more granular segregation of waste streams as opposed to just a three-way segregation. We talked about welfare of Purakarmikas. So how have the plans on these fronts progressed and what difference has COVID made to all of this?
Yeah, so good evening to all of you. Really, thank you very much for having me on this webinar. And yes, Bangalore is one of the major cities of the country, generating, what do you say, about 4,500, about 5,000 tons of municipal solid waste on a daily basis. And it is a city which has grown on steroids. It grew in the last 20 years. It is not because I'm a Bangalorean myself. I have seen the city grow from my childhood days to, when we grew from the 90s and the IT boom, which came into Bangalore city, brought in a lot of challenges as well. Though it brought up a lot of employment, it also got, major problems. And one of the major problems was the municipal solid waste. Talking about municipal solid waste, I have been here on the helm of affairs for the last 5 years in BBMP, and I have seen when I reported to BBMP as a citizen, even I used to be very very disappointed with the kind of system that was, and the kind of collection mechanism that was, and used to see the Parakarmikas in tattered clothes, and then autos not functional, auto not coming. You have to have influence. I mean, to influence to get an auto to your house and those kind of things. So, and then I was asked to take up this challenge. And over a period of time, I studied myself. As Elanka was a model where I worked on a small group of people with the citizens' involvement and participation. And then whatever you see in the 2016 SDM rules, we had already done it there. And so it was already an experiment which we started off on the advice and then on the discussion with people. So basically, it was a citizen engagement program that drove this program, especially from the Elanka group, was one of the first successful group in municipal solid waste, where we reached 80% segregation level. Absolutely, there was no garbage. And then, we had a good amount of, we were trying our best for processing. So here, 2016 SWM rules did take a setback because of the pandemic, because most of the implementing officer, because like you said, in the movie also you saw that, citizens need to be made aware, citizens need to be educated, and they need to be told that they have to segregate the waste. And then in case they don't segregate the waste, then what is the problems? So these kind of things, we did try to do it. Like you must be aware that Bangalore did a lot of compost Sundays, where, many awards we had. We called people and then we made them understand that what segregation is, why we should do segregation. Still, we used to find that, we again, in the same area, you see that next day you find the front of the same compost something, again, a huge pile of garbage where people come and just throw garbage and go. Basically, the magnitude of the population of the city itself is a major challenge. So it is over a period of time. But after having said that, I would again tell that Bangalore is not what Bangalore was about 5 years back. We have reached about 45, percent of segregation levels, and then also that discipline has come. We have brought in transparency in the system. When the Parakarmikas, they said there were 36,000 Parakarmikas, but we actually found that by biometrics we had only 18,000 people. So we made them efficient. We have made the PK mapping where every citizen would know. Shortly we'll come out with a system where every citizen would know that who is the Parakarmika in their area, who is the auto tipper driver or auto tipper which is in their area, whether he's come, not come. So these kind of things, and then everything basically amounts down to billing. Like again, there was a garbage mafia where a lot of things were wrongly reported and huge monies were being collected. So even that is also completely stopped. We were able to successfully do that. So it is a big challenge, because what happened was the stability of bureaucracy. Like generally what happens is in municipal solid waste, nobody would like to stay there for more than a year or so. Everybody would like to go in for, bureaucratic thing. We are basically bureaucrats, Again, you have to have interest. For example, whoever is in the municipal solid waste, it's not like the other departments. You must have a passion, you must have an interest to work in this department. Otherwise, absolutely things will, follow. So segregation levels also in 2017, I reached the level of 55% segregation, where 1,700 tons of wet waste, was being collected. So again, it is an ongoing process. It is a process we have to educate citizens. We have to, especially slums, lower level areas. Now, like the colonies, like they're talking about the societies, the apartments, they understand, they segregate. At least we have been able to make people understand what is the importance of segregation. People understand. And when they throw garbage, they're scared, somebody is going to catch them. So that amount of, fear or confidence or this and whatever we have collected. And our marshals also have done a great job of, finding people and then doing it. Maybe, we have reached a particular level. I need to go from point A to B, but then I'm somewhere in between. So we are in the process of going there. And second challenge is as regards processing. Processing, yes. We are also completely against waste to energy plants, and I'm 100% sure that these things we should be discouraging. I would also always prefer our action. The Bangalore City's action plan is to reduce the garbage at their own ward levels. In fact, the Honorable High Court also has directed us to one thing. I think in the movie they was talking about the courts not being proactive, or the judges don't know and they pass orders. But in our case, we have been lucky that we had a good set of judges and also a very good set of petitioners who filed this case. And it was a guiding force for us, over a period of time. And we never had any clashing of interest. We did possible. Wherever was not possible was the challenges we faced because of so many issues at the ground level. It was not that the DBP did not have the will to do it. It was a challenge from the political angle. It was the challenges from the local people and those kind of things. But we are trying our best to steer our ship in the right direction, and then we are going in the way. And also, High Court also has formed. We are having a coordination committee with a group of citizens with whom we are interacting, and then we would like to put in a place which is a win-win situation for the city. So that's basically what it is. And then again, COVID has had its own challenges. The collection of waste had gone a little. This one, it reduced by about 40%. There was a reduction of waste. And then even that also, we were collecting the Paurakarmikas, and the people did work during that particular period of time, of course, with a shorter period of time. So that we did definitely keep the city clean. It was not that the city was, not attended to. So this we have been able to do. Yeah.
One thing, Mr. Khan, I'm sure none of us were prepared for the quantum of biomedical waste that was generated over the last 1.5 years. This was something which was totally unprecedented. So what kind of, were there any special programs or trainings for Paurakarmikas, any special, of course, and also protection given to them? What has the BBMP done on that front, if you could just share in brief?
Yeah. So see, when the first pandemic was announced, none of us were actually prepared for it, and none of us knew exactly what would be the protocol. So any orders that were issued were based on our day-to-day experience. So when the Honorable Prime Minister announced lockdown, the first lockdown, so the entire draft of what should be done was written by me. And then we were asked to give a training to the Paurakarmikas, saying that, what should be used, what should not be used. Basically, when previously in the uniform, when we were giving them masks, they never used to wear the mask because they say that we can't breathe. It's very difficult for us to breathe. I don't want to wear a gloves because gloves is very difficult to wear. And those kind of things, we are having issues. Now, after that, when we educated them, they knew that, if you don't wear this is your problem. This is what it is. Then we started providing them with this one. And we also gave PPE kit in containment zones. The first area, we made some containment zones. In the containment zone, they were given PPE kits and they were educated. Even the auto drivers were also, told, not to pick up waste, which is like, lying outside unless they are, properly protected. So that was the mechanism that we did, and then that was collected, and then we had a group of companies that were tied up for basically this waste has to be incinerated for incinerating this. So biomedical waste companies who were managing there, they were asked to clear this waste. That's how we did it.
Okay. Thank you. I will come back to you, Mr. Khan, later. From here, I would just like to bring in Pinky. Pinky is an independent researcher and author and journalist who's been working in the sphere of waste for a very long time. Pinky, if you could just tell us what you have seen on the ground over the past 1.5 years in terms of segregation, collection, and processing of waste, and how you feel this has impacted the waste worker community, how the pandemic actually impacted the waste worker community in the city.
Okay, so when the lockdown was announced, waste management service. So while collection was essential, the rest of the services of processing, recycling was basically non-essential, which then kind of impacted the entire informal recycling value chain. The way the informal recycling value chain is structured, it's like a pyramid with the waste pickers being at the bottom rung of the pyramid. So you have the waste pickers, which could either be free roaming waste pickers not registered with the municipality, or they could be registered but working informally. And I'm not saying this about Bangalore because landfills and dumping grounds, but it is very true of other cities. Then you have informal workers who may be registered but working informally, picking waste from streets. Then you have those waste pickers who are registered with the ULB, which is either might be employed or contracted, like in our case, the dry waste collection centers. Then you have specialized waste pickers, which collect hair. Then you have waste sorters at different levels. You have home-based waste sorters. You have itinerant buyers who basically go and collect newspapers. Then you have the neighborhood small scrap shops. You have the dry waste collection centers. And then you have the waste traders and aggregators. And in our case, it's the Jolly Mola. And from there, it goes to the informal waste processors, which is basically where our waste goes to get processed, which is Nayan Delhi in Bangalore. So while there was one lot which was essential, the rest of the services totally were inessential. So in a way, it basically impacted cash flows. It led to accumulation of waste material because the entire activity of sorting, grading, aggregating, trading, processing, everything came to a standstill. And with that whole thing, again, last year there was severe price drops. Value of material also dropped. So all this had a cascading effect on waste pickers whose basically lives are precarious and they're mostly undervalued. But by saying that, I do understand that from 2016 onwards, I mean, long before the 2016 rules came in, there were a lot of, there was this whole struggle where many groups got together to mobilize rights for waste pickers, which included right to identity and recognition, that is occupational identity cards, right to waste, access to clean segregated dry waste, right to organizing, formation of collectives, right to sorting spaces, right to representation where the government consulted, right to training and access to social security. So all these things have taken place in the past. And in 2016, the rules came in, which actually recognized, and 2016 rules also, I must credit Bangalore to be being instrumental in getting that whole thing, going, because Bangalore, as rightly pointed out in the introduction, was one of the first cities to actually issue occupational identity cards. And Bangalore has actually taken that whole concept of integration into true letter and spirit, which is not the case with other municipalities, because I've traveled to 14 different cities as part of my previous study to look at what exactly do they really mean by integration. Is integration enough to just recognize and give occupational ID cards, or is it much more deeper? And I'll stop here.
Thank you, Pinky. So speaking of integration, or speaking of I'm glad you threw light on that entire chain of, waste management, at the various levels, the various intersections, and how waste workers come in, how there are different types of workers involved in this sphere. I'm happy to say that we have a guest with us today, Mansoor, who actually operates a dry waste collection center in Bangalore. And I thought that he would probably be the best person to give us an idea of, what it has been like on the ground for them over the past 1.5 years. What are the challenges they have faced? I can see him. Mansoor bhai, are you there? आप है ना? आप सुन सकते हैं?
अभी सुन रहा हूँ मैं।
ओके,
तो मैं अभी अपना इंट्रोडक्शन दे देता था।
हाँ, बहुत शुक्रिया। आप थोड़ा अपने बारे में बताइए, और फिर जैसे हम लोग सुबह चर्चा कर रहे थे, अगर आप थोड़ा बता सकते हैं कि ये पिछले 1 साल में आपका जो तजुर्बा या अनुभव रहा है आपके काम में,
ठीक है,
उसके बारे में थोड़ा हमें बता दीजिए।
जरूर, ठीक है। फर्स्ट, मेरा नाम है मंसूर। मैं 168 पट्टाभी रामनगर जयनगर डिवीजन में काम करता हूं। तो पिछले लगभग 9 साल से मैं काम कर रहा हूं ड्राई वेस्ट कलेक्शन सेंटर पे। 2013 में मैंने जयनगर पे काम चालू किया था। तो मैं जो भी आज इतना आप लोगों से मिलके बात करने का जो भी क्रेडिट आता है वो पूरा आसिफ दौड़ा को ही जाएगा, क्योंकि मेरे को इतना ट्रेनिंग करके तो आज सेग्रीगेशन 70, 60, 80% तक हम लोग लेके आए हैं। जैसे कि वेट वेस्ट, ड्राई वेस्ट एंड सैनिटरी वेस्ट, इसके बारे में हर एक सिटीजन जो भी है तो बहुत अच्छा रेस्पॉन्स कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि सेग्रीगेशन के बारे में हम लोगों को बताने में शुरुआत में बहुत दिक्कत हो रही थी। अभी कुछ उतना दिक्कत नहीं है, मगर अभी भी सिटीजन्स को होंगे या अपने वार्ड वाइज में हम लोग उनको इस तरह कुछ अलग तरीके का कलेक्शन चाहिए, और उनको इस कलेक्शन में अभी कोई घर चेंज करता होता है, कोई एरिया बदल के आने हैं, उस टाइम पे उनको अलग से फोन नंबर देना चाहिए, क्योंकि जब घर खाली होता है तो बहुत ज्यादा वेस्ट उनको अलग, जब जो घर में रहते हैं उस घर से दूसरे घर को जाने में तो दिक्कत होती है। तो उस टाइम पे उस वेस्ट को कहाँ छोड़ना है, कैसा छोड़ना है, इन लोगों को उतना समझदारी से नहीं रहता है। तो जब थर्माकोल, कपड़ा, जूता, चप्पल, जो भी बैग वगैरह सब कुछ रहता है, या तो घर के गेट के सामने पौधे के सामने डाल देते हैं, या तो ट्रांसपोर्ट के अंदर डाल देते हैं, तो उस टाइम पे सब हम लोगों को दिक्कत होती है। तो इसलिए मैं सिटीजन्स को ये बताना चाहता हूँ कि तो ड्राई वेस्ट कलेक्शन सेंटर वालों को बहुत ज्यादा से ज्यादा फोकस करना बहुत जरूरी है, क्योंकि वेट वेस्ट आप आराम से कंपोस्ट खुद कर सकते हो, मगर रिसाइकलिंग का जो भी वेस्ट होता है उसको ड्राई वेस्ट कलेक्शन सेंटर या तो कबाड़ी शॉप वाला या तो फैक्ट्री, इनको ही संभालना बहुत जरूरी है। क्योंकि टोटल वेस्ट आके 72 कैटेगरी हम लोग उसमें जो सब वॉलेंटियर लोग होंगे या फैक्ट्री वाला जो भी बंदे हैं आइडेंटिटी किया है कि 72 कैटेगरी। तो नॉर्मल से अपने जो भी एक पेन होता है या सीडी कैसेट होता है या मोबाइल होता है या ईयरफोन होता है या तो फैक्स होता है, तो हर तरीके का कैटेगरी इसमें सेपरेट करने के बाद ही उसको हम रिसाइकलिंग कर सकते हैं। तो 72 कैटेगरी भी हर घर में नहीं कर सकेंगे, मगर हम लोगों को नॉर्मली वेट वेस्ट, ड्राई वेस्ट एंड सैनिटरी वेस्ट, इस तीनों को अलग करके और वार्ड वाइज के अंदर हम लोगों को माइक्रो प्लान दिया हुआ है, ए ब्लॉक, बी ब्लॉक, सी ब्लॉक। तो मंगलवार, शुक्रवार, सोमवार, गुरुवार, बुधवार, शनिवार, संडे के दिन छुट्टी है, क्योंकि 6 दिन काम करके तो हम लोगों को क्या है सवेरे 7 बजे से 2, 2:30, 3 बजे भी लग जाता है कलेक्शन करने में, क्योंकि इतना टाइम लगता है। अभी सवेरे हम लोग 6 बजे जाके सीटी अनाउंसमेंट आवाज करेंगे तो कोई 3 बजे आके सो के रहता है, कोई 2:30 बजे सो के रहता है, कोई नाइट वर्क करके होता है। तो जब क्या होता है, लोग सिटीजन्स हम लोगों को चिल्लाते हैं, तुम आराम से इतना तुमने सेग्रीगेशन के बारे में तुमने बोला है तो आराम से आओ, दिक्कत नहीं है। क्योंकि हम लोग 2 मिनट एक घर के सामने बैठ के या तो खड़ के उनसे बात करेंगे तो प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व होएगा, क्योंकि उनको समझाना चाहिए। क्योंकि अभी देखिए पूरा घर झाड़ के जब तुम डोर के पास आते हैं तो वहां पे बाल, मिट्टी, धूल, ये सब क्या करते हैं, झाड़ के ड्राई वेस्ट में डाल देते हैं, मगर वो ड्राई वेस्ट नहीं होता है। जैसे हम लोगों को कैसा इसमें ग्राउंड लेवल में पता चलता है, मतलब जैसे गाड़ी के अंदर जब बकेट उठा के ऐसा हम डालते हैं तो वो मिट्टी, धूल पूरा आके हमारे चेहरे पे ही गिरता है। तो उस टाइम पे उन लोगों को समझाना चाहिए, देखिए मैडम इसको वेट वेस्ट में डालना बहुत जरूरी है। और जो सैनिटरी पैड, हगीज, जो भी रहता है उसको पेपर में रैप करके रेड मार्क डालो, या तो बोल के उसको अलग सेपरेट से देना चाहिए। तो इसके बारे में सब हम लोग धीरे धीरे समझा रहे हैं। तो अभी क्या है, मेजर प्रॉब्लम क्या है, ड्राई वेस्ट। ड्राई वेस्ट वॉल्यूम ज्यादा होता है, जैसे कि थर्माकोल देखने में वेटलेस है मगर वॉल्यूम ज्यादा होता है, मगर लोगों को ये पता नहीं है कि थर्माकोल रिसाइकलिंग हो सकता है, नो प्रॉब्लम। जो भी सिटीजन्स को मैं क्या बताना चाहता हूँ, थर्माकोल इधर उधर सड़क पे, ट्रांसपोर्ट के नीचे, मोरी में, लेक में डालना जरूरी नहीं है। आप आराम से ड्राई वेस्ट कलेक्शन सेंटर वाला जो बंदा आता है उसके हाथ में दे सकते हैं। और फट्टा कपड़ा नो प्रॉब्लम, मगर घर पहुंच के गीला करके उसको नहीं डालना है, गीला करके डालेंगे तो ड्राई वेस्ट गीला हो जाएगा। अभी जो भी हम लोगों को इतना नॉलेज है, जैसे कि अभी दही का डब्बा लाते हैं, आधा विदा खाते हैं, ड्राई वेस्ट में डाल देते हैं। तो उस टाइम पे क्या होता है, प्रॉब्लम होता है, जैसे मैग्नेट्स आते हैं, ढांस पहुंचते हैं, स्मेल शुरू हो जाता है, क्योंकि कंपोस्ट का जो भी सब्जी, खाना, सांबर, इडली, मीट वगैरह जो भी रहता है, इसमें भगवान का दिया हुआ एक बहुत बड़ी सुविधा क्या है, वो कंपोस्ट होने के लिए कन्वर्ट हो जाता है। तो जब कंपोस्ट के लिए वो कन्वर्ट होना शुरू हो जाता है तो ऑटोमेटिकली मैग्नेट्स आ जाएंगे, स्मेल आएगा। तो जब हम लोग घबराएंगे, चिल्लाएंगे, क्योंकि हम जो गलती किया है हम लोगों को एहसास ही नहीं रहता है। आधा गीला केला खाया, उसमें ही डाल दिया। हर घर के अंदर 3 डस्टबिन रहना बहुत जरूरी है। तो 3 डस्टबिन मतलब 3 बकेट रखने की जरूरत नहीं है, 2 बकेट 1 बैग, क्योंकि ड्राई वेस्ट के लिए बैग रखना बहुत जरूरी है। 2 बिन 1 बैग ऑनलाइन में मिल सकता है, नो प्रॉब्लम। हम लोगों को इतना भी सुविधा जो भी मिला है, 2 बिन 1 बैग से हम लोग सीखे हुए हैं, नो प्रॉब्लम। आपका ई
आप
वेस्ट का
एक
प्रॉब्लम भी सॉल्व कर सकता है ड्राई वेस्ट कलेक्शन सेंटर वाला। बोलिए।
अभी जो इतना ग्लव्स और मास्क जो यूज हो रहे हैं, उसको लेके
हाँ।
आप कोई दिक्कत फेस कर रहे हैं क्या? सिटीजन्स वो ठीक तरह से रैप करके या आइडेंटिफाई करके देते हैं, या उसके बारे में ट्रेनिंग है?
देखिए मैडम, हम लोग जो भी, हमारा जो बीबीएमपी से ताल्लुका जब से लगा हुआ है, हमने मस्टिंग पॉइंट में हर आदमी को, हमारे जो भी गीला कचरा लेने जाने जाते हैं साथी लोग, उनको समझा के भेजते हैं, जैसे कि वेट वेस्ट, ड्राई वेस्ट, सैनिटरी वेस्ट। तो ये क्या होता है, जब गाड़ी का प्रॉब्लम था, लोग कुछ ना कुछ बोल के बच जाते थे। जैसे कि एक गाड़ी आता है, हम लोग जैसे 2 कलेक्शन सेग्रीगेशन कैसा करेंगे, हम कलेक्शन करके सेग्रीगेशन करके देंगे तो भी ये लोग हमारे ही सामने मिक्स करते हैं, ये एक्सक्यूज देते थे। अभी जब आपका जो सवाल है, कोरोना आने के बाद क्या हो गया, सब लोगों को एक ही डर था कि हमारा जान कैसा बचना चाहिए, मगर मास्क यूज एंड थ्रू यूज करके फेंकने से बीमारी और फैलेगी, कम नहीं होएगी। तो इसीलिए हम लोग शुरू में, हमारे दिमाग में भी नहीं भागा, कम से कम चलो 7 दिन भी हो गया, ड्राई वेस्ट कलेक्शन सेंटर में इतने मार्क्स आने लगे, इतने मार्क्स आने लगे, ब्लोज आने लगे। तो हम लोग सोचा, क्या भाई, हम लोग ऐसा काम कर रहे हैं तो इसके अंदर कितने आदमी, कोई 4 आवर पेन के होता है, कोई 3 आवर पेन के रहता है, एकदम इन्होंने ड्राई वेस्ट में डाल दिया। अभी हम कैसा इसको छू के, हम हमारे जो भी वर्कर्स थे वो सब डरने लगे। बाद में उनको धीरे धीरे समझाए, समझाने के बाद हम लोगों को मार्क्स, ब्लोज सभी ऑलरेडी हसीरुदड़ा से मिला हुआ था, तो उसमें कुछ दिक्कत नहीं था। बाद में मैंने एक फेसबुक में वीडियो अपलोड किया, देखिए भाई लोग, इस तरह कॉटन का मास्क यूज कीजिए, घर से ही, घर में ही बना सकते हैं मास्क, कुछ प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। मगर अभी आप इतने घबराए हो के सड़क पे उधर इधर कहाँ भी मास्क फेंक दिया तो बीमारी कम नहीं होगी और ज्यादा से ज्यादा फैलेगी। तो हमने उसके साथ फाइट करके धीरे धीरे अभी लोग समझदारी से घर से, अभी क्या हो गया, एक मास्क का आके 10 रुपया, 15 रुपया, 25 रुपया, 150 रुपया तक भी लेके खरीद के लोग पहन रहे थे। अभी धीरे धीरे समझ आ गया, जैसे कि अभी कॉटन का ज्यादा से ज्यादा यूज हो रहा है। तो हम लोगों को कोविड में एक ही प्रॉब्लम था, मतलब क्या, चल के आ रहे थे, चल के आके सवेरे कलेक्शन और हम सेग्रीगेशन, हम तो 5:30-6 बजे तक भी काम किया है हमने। ये नॉर्मली संडे के दिन छुट्टी है, बाकी के जो ज्यादा से ज्यादा दूर रहते थे वो लोग छुट्टी कर दिया। जो बनशंकरी, जैसे कि जेपी नगर या तो कोतनूर से तक हमारे सेंटर पे आके काम करके, तो हमारे को उतना कुछ कोविड का टेंशन उतना हम नहीं लिया, क्योंकि हम लोगों को पिछले जो लॉकडाउन में भी सुविधा ये दिया था कि जैसे कि नर्स, पुलिस और डॉक्टर और बीबीएमपी वालों को आराम से काम के बारे में कुछ टेंशन नहीं दिया। तो हम लोग बहुत आराम से काम किया है, तो उसकी कुछ दिक्कत नहीं है। कुछ देश के लिए करना बहुत जरूरी है, क्योंकि देखिए 1 टन पेपर रिसाइकलिंग नहीं हुआ तो बहुत से ज्यादा झाड़ को कतरना पड़ता है। जब हमारे को ऑक्सीजन कहाँ से मिलता है, पौधों से मिलता है। तो हम लोग परिसर के साथ काम करेंगे तो बहुत बढ़िया रहेगा। शायद आपका कुछ सवाल रहेगा तो आप पूछिए, मैं जवाब दूंगा।
बहुत शुक्रिया मंसूर भाई। मैं बाद में फिर अगर कोई सवाल रहे किसी का तो मैं आपके पास फिर से वापस आऊंगी।
जरूर, थैंक यू,
थैंक यू वेरी मच। So actually, yes, I will also take that last line from him. देश के लिए कुछ सभी को कुछ ना कुछ तो करना चाहिए. We should all be sensitized to the needs of the nation. I'm going to take my next question to Dr. Rajeshri Reddy, who is an associate professor at the University of Toronto. Dr. Reddy has had a long history of, her research has focused on e-waste management. And one of her current research areas is how the people of a city at large comes to care for waste issues. Because as we have seen both from the film as well as from what Mansoor just shared with us, it is very important for people to care and for that care to manifest itself in their actions and decisions. Welcome, Rajeshri. If you could just share your observations on citizen responsibility and awareness, not just with respect to procedural aspects like segregation, but also how it comes to bear upon the needs and rights of waste workers in this sphere, particularly in the informal sector.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you for the participants who are here and the panelists who are here. So just briefly, I want to talk a little bit about my past research has been on electronic waste, although that wasn't the focus of the documentary that was shown at the outset of this panel discussion. I do want to take a few minutes to talk about electronic waste before coming to the question of how is it that citizens come to care for the environment and how they work to make our environment better. So just to talk about electronic waste for a moment, and I want to credit people such as Mr. Mansoor Gauss and the organization that he is part of, Hasrudala, which he mentioned just briefly, that it is thanks to them that and the efforts of other such like-minded organizations that in the MSW rules that came into effect in 2016, that we see an acknowledgement within those rules that informal workers have to be integrated into the recognized and integrated into our waste management infrastructure. But what I want to suggest is that they are actually the people that have been creating the infrastructure when none existed. So if we talk about things like waste management in India, who are the people who are managing the waste in India? Before authorities, before kind of the government, the state gets involved, we have, because of livelihood pressures, we have a whole bunch of people working to manage waste. Oftentimes, the way in which they manage waste is that they stop something from becoming waste, right? Something that they extend the life of a product before we can fully kind of designate it as waste, right? So in other words, they are deferring something from becoming waste. And in order to do that, they have created the infrastructure necessary for that to happen. What I also want to emphasize is that these workers, broadly, I think we should understand them as waste workers, but as, and I, not in this panel, but I think in the larger imagination, there's oftentimes simply a focus upon waste picker, and rather than thinking about kind of the all kinds of work that happens along the waste value chain, right? So the waste worker is to be recognized, and I think I thank Pinky Chandran for, kind of, for outlining some of those things. But what I also want to emphasize is that this work is knowledge work, right? That they are doing, as they do this work, they are gaining skills for themselves, gaining knowledge themselves. They know what to pick, how to process. And it is very important, I think, to recognize the knowledge that they bring to it. So to emphasize again, I think perhaps what the citizens, as they come to care for the environment, perhaps to think about waste workers as the people who manage our waste, that they are the managers, that they provide the infrastructure. Often their bodies are the infrastructure for collecting and transporting waste. And to recognize that, I think, is very important, because I saw in the question and answers, one of the issues is that there is still a very paternalistic way in which people think about waste workers. And in terms of then the recognition, unfortunately, while the MSW rules of 2016 might recognize informal waste workers who are working with municipal solid waste, the situation is wholly different when we come to the question of electronic waste. So while there is a great deal of anxiety about proliferating amounts of electronic waste in cities of India and in more broadly in the country as a whole, and anxiety about places like India and other developing countries becoming dumping grounds of electronic waste coming from elsewhere, what we have is a attempt to completely leave out informal waste workers within the e-waste rules of 2016. So if you look at the e-waste rules of 2016, that there's not really a role for informal workers that the government sees in the in that legislation. So there is a great deal of anxiety. So words such as leaking, waste leaking to the informal sector, waste being illegally processed in the informal sector. These are recurrent kind of words that come up, and I think that's wrong, right? Like why this anxiety about leakage? I think there was a mention earlier. I know that we are running short of time, so I'll keep maybe say a couple more things. I think Debaditya Sinha mentioned, for instance, that India ranks very low in an environmental kind of index when we look at kind of global ranking of how places like India do. And while that might be right, what we should also appreciate is that in India, we have overall, I think, plastic, the rate at which India is processing plastic, recycling plastic, is at 60% compared to less than 10% in places such as the US, right? So, and who does this? Who does this work of why do we have such high rate of processing of plastic? And I think, again, it is thanks to the waste workers who have the skills, the knowledge to recognize and differentiate different types of plastic and get it to the appropriate kind of places in the value chain. So I think we should recognize that waste workers provide an important service. They are actually the infrastructure of waste, and that we should recognize their knowledge, and we should move away from oftentimes kind of paternalistic ways in which we kind of talk about them, deal with them. And I'll leave it here. I can go into kind of the background of how the municipal, the electronic waste handling rules came to be, kind of the history of it, how initiatives such as the Indo-German-Swiss initiative was part of it. But in the interest of time, maybe I'll leave it here. And if there's an interest and there's time, I can come back and say
If there's time, we'll definitely come back to you, because that would add a lot of value to the discussion. For now, I'm just going to take your point about waste workers being recognized as knowledge workers and the backbone of the waste management infrastructure that our cities have. And unfortunately, realities that we see, that we saw in the documentary, reports that we hear, and even some individual conversations that we had, do not always point to that kind of recognition or even awareness among citizens about their role and contribution. I'm going to go next to Bhargavi Rao, who's also an independent researcher and consultant, and she's worked extensively in intersections of community action with policy, planning, governance, and she has also researched on the rights and even health rights of waste workers. And I'm going to ask you, Bhargavi, to share some light on how you see the entire rights framework for waste workers as specified in the laws. For example, Rajashri mentioned that even some of the terms that we use are actually in a way detrimental to the interests of waste workers. So how do you see the rights framework and how do you see the implementation on the ground over the years?
Yeah, thank you. A little correction. I am no longer independent consultant researcher.
I'm so sorry.
No worries. I work as a deputy director at the Center for Financial Accountability. It's a Delhi-based organization, and I'm also a trustee of ESG. And I have worked with ESG since 1999, and have been key to the entire process of the public interest litigation in the context of solid waste management.
Thank you for that clarification, and apologies for the mistake.
No problem. So going back it's important to see the legal framework. So when we are talking about integrating them and absorbing them, it is very important to see the Karnataka Municipal Corporation Act itself, which has identified solid waste management as an essential service. And if it is an essential service, it is also very clear that it cannot be outsourced, and it has to be, within the municipality itself.
Yes.
But unfortunately, for whatever reasons, again, this is something that is being questioned in the court, constantly saying that they have to be absorbed. They should not be considered as part-time job because they do put in 8 or 10 hours of work, so on and so forth. And in that context, the next legal provision that is very important is the Contract Labor Management Act, the Sexual Harassment Act, and the Minimum Wage Act. None of this is complied with. BBMP shies away from the responsibility when these people don't get their payments, or they don't take responsibility in providing all the necessary protective gear. For instance, we saw hundreds of waste pickers, Paura Karmikas, and others working in the sector, the auto drivers and others, who didn't have any protective gear, and it is only in some wards that it did start. I know Mr. Sarfaraz Khan has been working very hard in making these available to all of them. But yes, it has been a challenge. And something that is that must be of concern to all of us is we never look at this section of the workforce as somebody who need secure livelihoods at the end of the day. At some point of time, it has to be absorbed. They have to be on the payroll of the municipality. And once their livelihoods are secured, obviously their payments and health insurance and health benefits, all that should fall in place. And very importantly, there has to be grievance redressal mechanisms. Then they also don't have any facility for restrooms. There is absolutely no way they can access good, healthy food. Because we all know at the end of the day, they probably earn, the waste pickers in particularly, they earn about 100 or 150 rupees a day, for which they can probably afford only a plantain or a slice of bread or a toast or something like that. So their nutritional requirements are also something of grave concern. Then in the context of their housing, nobody ever thinks of housing. So once the labor laws are implemented in letter and spirit, then all of this will be taken care of, at least on paper, and then it can be made sure that it is implemented. So these are some of the basic legal provisions, and yes, there are some provisions here and there in the 2016 rules and also in the hazardous waste management rules as well. But yes, there is a concern of how the system is looking at the informal waste workers, and it is very important to integrate them into the system completely. In this context, I would like to add one thing. So awareness has to start very early. Now, I live in Padmanabh Nagar, which is supposed to be one of the model wards of Bangalore, and it is very nice to see the waste auto going every day morning all around with a little audio, telling people how to segregate and what time the autos will come for dry waste and wet waste. And to a large extent, things have fallen in place. But it also has to start in schools, and there also has to be some kind of door-to-door campaign at all sections of society. There is a very interesting book for children called The Bridge Home, written by Padma Venkatraman. And this is about 4 waste pickers in Chennai. The story is based in Chennai. It's an amazingly well-written, well-researched book. I would urge all adults also to read it if one has to understand the story.
I was just going to say that, maybe a lot of us adults can also have a lot to learn from that.
Yeah, I'll stop at that and we can come back later.
Yeah, thank you, Bhargavi. Thank you. So one of the things that you mentioned about awareness at all levels of society, across all sections of society, there is also a very distinct, socio-economic angle in how waste is perceived, in terms of waste generation, or in terms of even perception of, waste worker rights. There is a socio-cultural angle to this, which is often overlooked when we frame laws or when we discuss waste management. It all becomes a very technical exercise about segregation and what is to be done and how is it to be done. I'm going to invite Mr. Rajendran Prabhakar, and I think he is the best person who can tell us. He's a social activist who's been working on social justice for urban deprived communities in Bengaluru, and he has engaged with them in various ways. So, Mr. Prabhakar, if you could tell us how you have seen the way waste is perceived, the entire issue of waste is perceived across sections of society, and what it says for their rights or for, human rights at a broader level.
Actually, it's a very right time to discuss, though it's late, to discuss about the whole issue of municipal waste and entire waste that we have managed to produce and struggling with it. So the first thing is what I see is that, as you said, that there are different approaches to this whole thing. People look at from the governance point of view. People look at from the environmental angle to this, and also to look at the health angle to this, and different angles. But then I also want to focus on the people who are working with this waste, especially the waste pickers or waste workers. And I don't know whether we can call them waste workers because they know employers. So it's easy to call them waste workers, but who is paying them? So that way, in our cultural, socio-cultural thing, they're very special space that they're unwanted people, invisible people who are actually, they're not concerned with anybody. So in that context, what we see is that the waste workers are at the bottom of the pyramid and they are the receiving ends, and I'll call them almost semi-slaves and slaves, which we are actually the civil society or the civilized society is managed, want to be silent about it, or rather want to be wish away them in whatever visible way. But they want their service, but they don't want to attend to their needs. For example, all the waste collectors and waste workers in Bangalore, at least, they are got to fall into certain social category. At least 70% to 80% of them fall into a social category called scheduled castes. And vast majority of them are women, children, youths who are into this whole thing, which we all know. But the thing is, the governance system want to wish away this problem. See, most of the problem also lies with that they want to manage it somehow. Which are the ways to manage things? No. So we cannot just manage it because we have to entirely reorganize our conception and perception of the waste we are producing. The lifestyle we are promoting, the market lifestyle we are promoting, and the way we are producing waste, tons and tons of waste in the city. And also we have an idea that we will produce waste, somebody will pick up, somebody will transport, somebody will dispose it. So this idea of that, I will produce waste, there is somebody who will clear and will take the burden and spend their lifetime to live with the waste is an issue now. So that way, this whole system and culture and the understanding of caste system that is there in our mindset, which the governance and policy makers want to wish away, doesn't want to look at it and say that anyway, that will happen. Anyway, it has to be there. So we can't do much about it because they are at the receiving ends. So the migrant workers, the people who have shifted from different things, this is purely because of their livelihood. They want to get into this profession. So that way, these invisible environmentalists, the waste pickers, they are the invisible environmentalists, and they are most neglected in terms of every human rights. So we don't have as a system, as a bureaucrats, we don't have the basic constitutional morality. So the constitutional morality calls upon the basic values of equality, fraternity, and liberty. So as far as these waste workers are concerned, the invisible environmentalists or waste pickers are concerned, all these things are just not actually adopted or not implemented. In that context, the present economy, the city economy is thriving on this slave labor. So the slave labor is celebrated. Sometimes they even don't want to recognize it. And Bhargavi was rightly saying that the issues of these waste pickers and things like that. So that way it is right to them because we call them workers, but they are not workers because nobody pays them whom they are working for. They are, as somebody was saying, they are working for 100 rupees and 80 rupees. But that way, this governance has to take the prime responsibility of solid waste management. It cannot privatize to people and say that they will do it. We'll give a penny, we'll give some amount, and they will exploit and super exploit the people. So just to give you an example, out of the 198 wards in Bangalore, so many work orders as they have divided into, that most of them belong to the one caste in the one upper caste contractors, and 95 to 80% are from the Madiga, a scheduled caste community is pulled from the southern Andhra Pradesh, from Chittoor, Anantapur, and that belt. And that way, why the policies and the legal system is not working in favor of these workers. Even today in the morning, I met a couple of the waste pickers in the Paura Karmikas. They are saying their wages are not paid for months together. For months together, their wages are not paid. So the BBMP actually is, it's okay for them. Anyway, if not today, we will give some time back. So that way, the waste and waste workers issue is not to be taken seriously. And because it's time that we take it up in the most serious way. Otherwise, we are going to make it more complicated, and it cannot be done the way the private BBMP wants it to handle through private things. They have to be brought and they should bring under the government, the scope of governance directly, and they're not going to be paid by the contract workers, informal workers. They have to bring under the thing that the government governance mechanism take direct responsibility of these things, and definitely discourage the business establishments who are producing waste, plastic waste, because the industry, hotel industry and other certain industries which are producing waste are going to have long years of implications on the environment, and also immediate implications on these waste workers. And
of course.
So in that context, the government should take prime responsibility in employing directly. It cannot be privatized, and their social security issues needs to be looked upon. Thank you,
Mr. Prabhakar. Social security issues is something that has come up time and again. Non-payment has come up time again in this discussion. I'm sorry, we've already reached the end of our time slot, but Lekha has agreed to give me a slight extension, a 10-minute extension very kindly. So I'm just going to wrap up with two very quick questions, one for Mr. Sarfaraz Khan and one for Pinky. So 2 points that Mr. Prabhakar made. Number one, their invisibilization of these waste workers. And number two, the non-payment of salaries as well as, other social security benefits. Mr. Khan, I'm going to ask you if you see a roadmap ahead of you which can help bridge these problems, because we do seem to be hearing from a lot of Pora who say that they haven't been paid for months and they've had to incur very high health expenses, etc. So what is the plan or what is the roadmap for that? Yeah.
So, ma'am, I think, yeah. So I would like to just bring it to your notice that a lot of issues what Mr. Prabhakar has raised and then Madam has raised. Basically, yes, there are certain gaps, but if I start looking at the Paura Karmikas who were about 5 years back, they were just paid 3,000 rupees by the contractor. And then again, they were not being given, whatever was due, medical attention was not being given to them. And then, of course, literally, whatever they said was applicable 5 years back. Now, if you see Paura Karmikas, they are much better off. They come in scooters. Their salaries, minimum wages have been increased. 4,000. That was a single-handed exercise I did with my officer, Hemlata. 18,000 people, actually there were about 20,000 ghost workers. We removed them and then we got them and we started paying them. So these changes are these are very dangerous changes. There was a lot of protest by the garbage and garbage mafia and things like that when we got in. And because directly the Paura Karmikas were taken back from them. And then we have been, continuously monitoring their welfare. Literally, my office works as, as a labor office where they are always present. And then I work as their union leader. So Bangalore City is the only city corporation which gives them food in the afternoon, hot meals from ISKCON. All right. And then after that, as regards safety gear, yes, we are giving them the safety gear, but they don't wear it because they said it's uncomfortable. When somebody goes there, they say that people have not given. Whenever we have gone with them, then they said, sir, we have been given, but we don't want to wear it because it's not comfortable. All right. So what happens is, one small group of people don't represent the entire, the Paura Karmika community. Some of the Paura Karmikas are not paid for simple reason because some union leader brings them and then, just puts them into the system and then said, you start working and then you start paying. They are not on our payrolls. We have told them so again, it's a mafia. Again, what they do, they bring people from Andhra Pradesh, they start putting them inside the system and then say, okay, please, please include them in the biometrics and start paying them the salaries. Whereas, wherever it is possible, we have paid all the 198 watts Paura Karmikas are paid on time. By 5th, the salaries are made and then they get the salary slip as well. And then as regards the contract, also the contract system, I think Mr. Prabhakar has probably not been updated with the new situation. It is not run by any community. We have allowed everybody to participate. Now 80% of the 80 wards are done by the Paura Karmika family members who were previously working under the contractors are the contractors now. They have taken up on 80 wards. They are doing it. And then minimum wages to 100% we are giving them. Institutionalizing and regularizing them, we have already done it. So they are directly on the payrolls of PPMP. They are not on the payrolls of the contractor. And quickly, because the people have been speaking about the SPV, I would like to just quickly run through SPV. Let me tell there's a misconception here. Absolutely, BBMP is not giving away its responsibility of collecting garbage or anything like that to any SPV. SPV is just a special purpose vehicle. As you know, you must have recently seen there was a murder of a corporator just based on garbage. All right. So garbage, there's a lot of political interference that has been created only to remove this political interference. There is going to be a special commissioner, solid waste management, joint commissioner, and full team of officers will be working on solid waste management. Whatever other things like tendering, documentation, and those kind of things is what the SPV is all about. There's a misconception, people are just speaking about it without knowing the facts. They should speak to us before they actually, get down to this one. So basically, it is not that this BBMP will never shirk its responsibility of. We have come a long way in last 5 years. we are committed to keep the cities clean, and we are committed to our power karmikas first and foremost things, ma'am. So I would like to tell you again, let there be no doubts about it that, BBMP is committed to the welfare, and we definitely see that whatever is possible, and the suggestions of what Mr. Prabhakar has said is very, very well taken. Wherever there are gaps, there may be gaps, small gaps are there. I would definitely try to, set those things right. Again, I would try to reiterate, I work as their union leader. You ask any power karmika, they say that I'm their union leader. Okay, they don't go anywhere else. They come to me first, then they go to the union. So that having said that, I appreciate your concern, the warriors, our city warriors.
Thank you very much.
We are with them, is what I would like to say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan, for your inputs. Pinky, I'm sorry I can't give you much time, but very briefly, if you can wrap up this conversation. One thing I would like to take to you, even though this is like a closing question, but this is an audience question. I'm afraid we were not able to get into all the questions. There were a lot of technical nitty-gritty questions related to technical nitty-gritty also, but I'm not going into them today for paucity of time. But there is one question on political will and political challenges coming in the way of an effective waste management system. And Pinky, if you could just give us some comments on this based on your experiences, not only in Bangalore, but also what you've observed across the country, across the state. Politically, what are the challenges that need to be overcome to make the waste management system as we want it to be?
Okay, well, I hate to do this, but I must bring this example of Indore, though I don't agree with them being ranked #1 in the name of visual cleanliness. But if you look at it at the Indore model, I think everybody has worked in tandem, and it is because there is strong political will that they have succeeded in being #1 on the surface level. But having said that, I think, waste is definitely a political issue. That apart, it being a social issue, a social construct, it is complicated, it is steeped in contradictions, so there are layers and layers of dimension in it, and nothing moves without political will, directly or indirectly. Like what Mr. Khan rightly said, yes, Bangalore has been at the forefront, ready to implement a lot of things that citizen groups or volunteers, propose, and they're always willing to try. And like I said, we do have the 2016 rules. And what was interesting is that in the 2016 rules, there is also a manual that was created by the Swachh Bharat, which actually talks about the roadmap of how you have to look at, integration of waste workers. And like what I said at the start, inclusion and integration are often used interchangeably. And while there is a lot of awareness about waste pickers right now, but it is merely an acknowledgement, and that's what integration does. It's an acknowledgement that needs to move beyond registering of waste pickers and engaging them, waste pickers in collection, and basically to expand the benefits to the entire downstream recycling industry. And what we are also asking for is basically inclusion, which means respecting that there are different settings, systems, operations, and varied groups in the informal waste space, and allowing for full participation in policy design, governance. And one has to move beyond, register, regulate, and tax, and look at ways to improve technical capacity, access to finance, upgradation of infrastructure, skill upgradation, social security. So inclusion also acknowledges that informal economy varies across the country, respects the entrepreneurial nature of work, and that there is no one-size-fits-all policy. But at the same time, all this cannot be like yesterday when I was at a webinar hosted by Chintan. I think Mr. Sanjay Upadhyay made this comment saying India is an over-legislated country, but lacks implementation. And implementation will be, achieved in true letter and spirit if we have strong governance and also strong political will. So that's what I would like to say.
Thank you very much. This is a topic on which we could go on for another full 1 hour session, but unfortunately we don't have the time. I would just like to close by thanking all the panelists and all the audience who've been with us till the end. We hope that, and a very big thank you to BIC and Vidhi Legal, of course. We hope that we will have a chance to discuss more in depth in more sessions in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.